Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the Athenaeum of Philadelphia, one of well, it's our final Athenaeum at noon for 2021. And Bruce Laverty is here to round up his series on the Athenaeum. We're 219, and with 219 in the 21st century. We hope that you enjoy it. Have a wonderful time. Bruce, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Oops. Share my screen. Okay, are we good? You can see that. Great. Thank you, Tess. It's hard to believe that it's been 9 months since the last time we spoke in the 219 session, and I dropped us off just at the cusp of the 21st century, and so I wanted to at least finish off the chronological examination of the Athenaeum's history with this talk, 219 in the 21st century, the Athenaeum embraces the digital. And as you recall from our former talks, I always like to start off with what I call the elevator speech. The Athenaeum is, among other things, a subscription library, a National Historic Landmark, and an independent research library with internationally recognized historical collections documenting architecture, design history, and the built environment. This was our last slide from the last show. Though many of you many of you will remember Y2K and the consternation that it caused, and the year of fear about what would happen in the new computer world when all those zeros turned over on our historical odometer, and of course that those fears proved to be pretty much unfounded. The image on the right is what the Athenaeum's web page looked like in the year 2000, and if you'll notice that we had 6 buttons on there, and down in the middle of the page is there a little note that says to view the PAB demo website, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that fear and about what led up to the Athenaeum's crossing into the 21st century and doing so successfully. Some of you may remember the wonderful movie Dr. Strangelove. This is the War Room, and so I tongue-in-cheek entitled this talk, "The Athenaeum Embraces the Digital, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Digitization." When I arrived at the Athenaeum in 1983, I thought that there was no piece of technology that was greater or could ever be greater than the IBM Electric 2, which for a person of the meager typing skills that I have, to have a typewriter that allowed you to correct yourself without employing either eraser or whiteout was nothing short of miraculous. And I really thought that technology could have stopped right there. We talked a lot about the end of history, when the Berlin Wall came down. Well, to me, this was the end of technology. I really didn't think that there could possibly be anything better, but boy, was I wrong. What has gone out with the typewriter erasers, and in some cases whiteout, is our card catalogs, and I get a sense of my age and my longevity at the Athenaeum is that when I first started working at the Athenaeum, researchers would come in and they would ask me to direct them to the catalog. As years passed, they would say, "Could you show me how to use the catalog? I've never used one of these." And then in latter years, they would point at the funny cabinets with the tiny drawers and say, "What are those?" But the catalog was a revolutionary invention, thanks to the first meeting the American Library Association here in Philadelphia, where they actually standardized the size of the catalog card so the cards could be interchanged between groups. But the idea of having a surrogate for the book on the shelf in multiple copies that could be rearranged in advantageous ways was the century and a half precursor of the digital age, and we cannot thank our librarians and our catalogers enough for that. Here is Jill Lemin using our card catalog, which you can see from behind her was at the bottom of the grand stair. Pretty much the only card catalog cabinet left in the building is still there today. And in 1979, the Athenaeum became connected with OCLC, which was an online system out of Dublin, Ohio, which connected 5,000 libraries and allowed librarians to enter new cataloging and access cataloging as well. This is not a computer; it is a terminal. So there was no computation going on. It was a connection that was connected with a dedicated telephone wire to 5,000 other libraries throughout the world. And actually, those dates are wrong. Keith Comm was here from 1979 through 93. For 14 years, Keith did retrospective cataloging of our rare book collection. On a machine that looked like that. And some of you who are librarians or who spent some times in libraries may remember this amazing set of green books. It was the 747 volume set of the National Union catalog of pre-1956 imprints. And what this was a 130 shelf foot set of copies of catalog cards from the Library of Congress that had been annotated, indicating what other libraries in America and around the world held those particular titles. So it was a comprehensive catalog, and one that we spent quite a bit of money. Actually was funded by the Getty Foundation for us to acquire, because when the Library of Congress began to have their catalog records online, they started in 1957, and so all of the pre-1956 imprints would be listed in this enormous set. And these too lived at the bottom of the grand stair on specially built shelves for them for a period of about 10 years. So at the Athenaeum in 1980, we got a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to create the Biographical Dictionary of Philadelphia Architects. This was a comprehensive work documenting the work of architects in practice in Philadelphia County from the year 1700 to 1930. The reason that they chose 1930 was they were limited in the number of pages that they could provide, that the publisher G.K. Hall would provide, and so this had a brief biography, some references in terms of bibliographic keys to each of the architects, and then most importantly, it had project lists that were searched from several dozen different resources on bits of paper. Unfortunately, G.K. Hall, the publisher, would not spring for an index. So if you knew the name of an architect, this was a wonderful resource. If you were looking for a building or an address, you were sorely out of luck. In 1983, the G.K. Hall also published the Catalog of Architectural Drawings, which was a mini version that I edited of the National Union catalog. We stopped at two volumes, far short of the 747 that the Library of Congress had. But this was the state-of-the-art way to get information into the hands of other people. So 300 sets of these were published, and they ended up in libraries around the country. And so people could look at our catalog in other settings, but of course these were impossible to update. When a new set of drawings came in and a new card got dropped in our architectural card file, there was no way for people outside of the building to know about it. And so there's the biographical dictionary. Here's a slide of the Bush Room. It wasn't taken on November 23rd, 1992, but I mentioned that date because it is my all-time high number of researchers in one day. I was the only person in the reference department at that time. We had 22 researchers in one day. I remember it was the Monday before Thanksgiving. There were graduate students crawling out of the woodwork coming in, and we had to set up extra tables for them. And it was a pretty busy day. And of course, that was the way things had to work. So that if you wanted to have access to the books or to the drawings or to the photographs, you had to come here and look at them yourself. Students being students the same way then as they are today, they often waited to the end of the semester to start to look seriously at what they had been assigned at the beginning of the semester. I was entertained by a researcher who comes in September and then comes back in the first week of December and says, "Could you tell me what I looked at when I was here before? I didn't write anything down." Actually, today I could do that thanks to digitization, but in those days there was no way for me to recreate that. But November 23rd, 1992, the all-time peak day of researchers here at the Athenaeum. And these were not all from one class; they were from multiple classes and multiple universities, and in some cases high schools. So in 1990, actually, let's just back up a little bit. In 1997, as we saw the computer age dawning and the ability to scan documents, not to make them searchable, but at least to make them scannable, the Athenaeum submitted a proposal to the William Penn Foundation to digitize the biographical dictionary. And by that, we just meant doing a single digital scan that was completely unsearchable, so that people could have this pretty much wherever they had a computer. It was a fairly modest grant. We had applied to William Penn Foundation, and the foundation came back to us and they said, "Sorry, we're not going to do that. However, we do like the idea, but we want you to make this searchable. We want you to include architectural drawings. We want you to include digital images, and we want you to go beyond the Athenaeum's own holdings." And we talked to our program officers and we said, "Well, that's going to cost a lot more money." And they said, "We know that. Do a grant and write it up." And so we wanted to do a proof of concept. And so in 1998, we got a grant from the Connolly Foundation to do a pilot project called the Roman Catholic Buildings Database. We chose that because in our own collection, we had materials that included churches and parish halls and schools and a variety of documentation, including photographs and drawings and manuscripts and specifications. So we thought it would be a great advance in improving what it was we wanted to do. And in fact, we were fortunate enough to bring on two brilliant people, Walter Rice Sr. And Walter Rice Jr., who is still with us, who essentially created the database and made it work, essentially based on what we created at the Athenaeum in terms of our desired outcome. So the result was, based on the success of the demonstration through the Roman Catholic Buildings Project, in the year 2000, the William Penn Foundation awarded the Athenaeum $1.3 million for a 4-year project to create the Philadelphia Architects and Buildings Database. One that was searchable by address, searchable by architect, by building type, searchable also by town, and tied information about buildings in a way that hadn't been done so before, and did so on a regional basis. This was not an Athenaeum only project, but we actually got cooperation and included material from 35 other local repositories. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the only regionally based architectural, comprehensive architectural database thus far, and it's still very much alive and with us. So if you were interested in the 500 block of Chestnut Street, you could search by address and indicate there that there were 3 folders at the Historical Commission. Take a look at the alternate names for buildings, and many buildings had multiple names, particularly considering the city is more than 330 years old. And so it was a great resource. There's our search page. And those of you who are Athenaeum members, I think you'll have to check with our membership secretary, but there's a very good chance that your subscription to PAB could be free with your membership. So check with them about that. But there are images that are included on PAB, and they are also tied in with collections. Now, these were built from the collection up, as opposed from the name of the building down. So you'll notice here that there's the Baxter's Panoramic Business Directory for Chestnut Street. And so what we did was we entered all the records for that particular resource at one time, and then tied them into project records. It's not as if we took 702 Chestnut Street and said, okay, let's research this building. It was driven by the collections up or the publications up, rather than from the building down. It was very quickly became evident that there were also map resources in the city that would be very helpful if we could somehow capture those as well. And this is a plate from the Hexamer and Locher Atlas from 1858, showing that same 700 block of Chestnut Street between 7th and 8th. This is the earliest of the Atlas plates that shows building footprints, and sponsored by fire insurance companies. They had an incredible amount of information, and they would go on. But capturing these images digitally was difficult in the year 2000 through 2003, without either doing intermediate steps in terms of slides or transparencies, or submitting them to a scanner that would mean that they'd have to go through a set of dangerous rollers, particularly considering the fragility of much of this material. And so the Athenaeum was fortunate enough in the year 2004 to establish the Regional Digital Imaging Center. This was funded primarily through the Florence Gould Foundation of New York, who bought the cruise scanner, the cruise the cruise scanner in 2004 to scan the entire Paul Philippe Cray collection. Gould Foundation was very much interested in projects that promoted Franco-American amity, and they were very impressed with our Paul Cray collection, and a French-born architect who was brought to America to teach the French style of architectural training at the University of Pennsylvania, then goes back to France and creates an American presence on French soil with the American Battle Monuments Commission, which actually I think one of our previous lunch lectures about the Benjamin Project discussed that. The cruise scanner was a scanner that was not harmful to the drawings. It could accommodate things that were under glass or still in frames, and we began to, with the help of the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, we examined the light levels of that and got a thumbs up as well. And so we have scanners large and small, and So we had high resolution image capture. The original remains stationary rather than sliding through rollers. It's very low ultraviolet light exposure. And so we began to scan the Paul Craig collection. Here's a drawing of the Rodin Museum, 17,000 drawings. This is the Century of Progress exposition in Chicago from 1933. And this is what the Cray collection used to look like. In Cray's office, they actually folded up every drawing 6 times, and then they were put into file folders. And as part of the scanning process, they all had to be unfolded, and rather than fold them back up again, we put them into nice new cabinets. While that was going on, we also decided, in terms of a business model, to make the cruise scanner and its staff available for outside work, both museums as well as private individuals. And one of the earliest customers and most important here is there are 2 representatives of the Secretary of State of New Jersey. On the right there is Denise Fox, watching these gentlemen carry this document out. And what they were carrying out to be scanned was New Jersey's copy of the Bill of Rights. Each one of the states was sent a copy for their ratification, and this was their copy. And I understand that that van was escorted by state police, at least until the middle of the Benjamin Franklin Bridge, where the New Jersey police peeled off. Hopefully they didn't make a U-turn in the bridge. So there is Jim Carroll, who's been with us from the beginning at the Imaging Center, and you'll notice that that object is framed, and so it did not have to be unframed to scan that. So what did we do with files once they got scanned? Well, in the very early days, in the early 2000s, they went onto CDs. And you'll notice there it says 75 files on that particular disk. And what this was, these were 75 35 millimeter color slides that had been scanned off-site and then put onto this CD. And they were kept in these handsome little carousel cabinets until they filled up, and they filled up rather quickly. And then we discovered that compact discs were not all that reliable in terms of their long-term survivability in terms of the digital images. And so the compact discs were replaced by DVDs, which had a much greater capacity. And this cabinet here, this 4-drawer cabinet, also quickly became filled. We decided to ditch the jewel case, which took up lots and lots of space. So these are just in archival plastic sleeves for each of the DVDs. But in consultation both with the Conservation Center and the Library of Congress, the longevity of the material on these on the DVDs is much greater. And notice here in the Paul Cray collection, this is disc 275. And notice it says Cray 173. Cray 173 is his project number. When Paul Cray died, they were working on about project 420. So you can estimate that there's well over 500 compact discs in that collection. And these were all created here at the Athenaeum, and they have those nice little labels right at the top. But even that began to become unwieldy. And so we had to go into the advanced and the phase that we're still in now, where we purchased our own server. And so 500 DVDs were uploaded onto the server in 60 days. And of those 500 DVDs, there were only 2 corrupt files found on those DVDs, which is really not too bad, and also an admonition of why you don't throw the original away when once the scanning is complete. The amount of server blades on this server in our basement vault has increased by about fivefold since it was first purchased. And in case you're wondering, well, what happens if there's a flood, or what happens if there's a fire, or something goes wrong with this server? Do all of the Athenaeum systems go down? No, or at least not for very long, because the servers are reflected in multiple locations around the country, as well as in the cloud, which was not possible at the time when things started. We talked about the Cruise scanner. And in addition to the Cruise, we also have a large format printer just across the hall, which can print items that are up to 6 feet wide with archival paper and archivally pigmented inks. And recently, about 3 years ago, we acquired the Bookeye scanner. That's been used for 2 projects. This is smaller than the Cruise, but it's excellent for scanning things that are bound, because it can either be done under glass, as the image there shows, or it can be done with a book cradle, so that the binding itself does not have to be splayed in order to scan those. And this has been used extensively on 2 projects in particular. The first one that was completed was the Philadelphia Real Estate Record and Builder's Guide, the entire run of this from 1886 to 1940 was scanned between beginning in 2018, and that went up early in 2020. About 24,000 pages altogether. This was, of course, a weekly newspaper devoted to the architectural trade. There's an overview of one of the headlines from January of 1910. If you look a little bit closer, you'll see the kind of material that is in there. And so here is a reference to the architectural firm of Hales and Ballinger. Hales and Ballinger. Ballinger Company is still in business as architects, receiving estimates for 2-story houses to be erected for Samuel Horner on Allegheny Avenue at Hartville, Rohr, and East Street. That may be the only reference anywhere to exactly who the architects or who the contractors were for a particular housing development. So large houses, small houses, mills, and industrial buildings, as well as transportation buildings, are all listed in there. So it really is an excellent resource. And then the other project, which is still ongoing, was sponsored by the Clear, a Clear grant, and it's a multi-institution grant for the digitization of the early records of Philadelphia congregations. That would include vestry minutes and baptismal records and burial records from places like Old Swedes Church or Christ Church, or in this case, it's a record of births and baptisms that was kept by Absalom Jones, who was the minister of the St. Thomas African Methodist Episcopal Church. The Philadelphia Congregations Project, in addition to doing the digitizing, it's a wonderful method of crowdsourcing the data that's involved here, and they have a description of these records, which date back to the early 18th century, and that can be a challenge, but and particularly for just a few people. They've had a number of training sessions and have worked with the Athenaeum in sort of bringing people together on that. I just wanted to mention one thing here. These are posters that were done for some of our exhibits over the last 20 years or so, and I wanted to give a shout out to Mike Seneca, who was the director of our imaging center until just last month. He served here for almost 22 years, running the imaging center. He had worked on the PAB project before that, but he he also had a terrific graphic sense, and so his profile was low in public, but the amount that he actually got done and the talent that he had will stay with the Athenaeum for quite a bit. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Mike, and I don't know whether he's listening, but he or watching. He absolutely hated to have his picture taken, and he hated even more to have his picture shown. So we'll show his handiwork instead. This is another poster that he designed for our Frank Furnace show back in 2013. So a little bit of a timeline reflecting where we've been. In 1979, the Athenaeum joined OCLC, which linked us up with those 5,000 libraries with that blinking green screen. In 1983, the NHPRC funded the catalog, the hard copy analog catalog of architectural drawings. In 1990, between 1990 and 1995, Pew funded Arlen-based online cataloging for that paper-based catalog that had just been produced 5 years before. In 1997, the Connolly Foundation funded that proto-PAB database, the Roman Catholic Buildings database. By the way, if you're asking where that is now, once PAB went online, it was folded into that, so it's not a separate database anymore. But you can search things by parishes or rectories, or actually you can search buildings by religion, religious affiliation, if you wish to do so. In 2000, PAB was launched. In 2004, the Imaging Center was founded. And one of the things that I hadn't mentioned was the Greater Philadelphia Geo History Network, which was established in 2005. Once the Gould Foundation grant came through to scan the Cray collection, and we had the Cruise scanner, it then became possible to scan maps, both our own maps as well as maps of other organizations, and have them available online in a high resolution format. So that just as with architectural drawings, quite often you would need to see things in high resolution and at very great detail. That was true even more so with maps. And so with a pilot grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Greater Philadelphia Geohistory Network was established. And within 2 years, the Free Library of Philadelphia had those 250 plates of Hexamer and Locher atlases scanned. The Athenaeum has since scanned all of its own atlases, and the other thing that happened during this time is that we actually set up the website and now have more than 7,000 map images that are available from 13 different institutions, and those are all served by the Athenaeum, and almost all of those things were scanned on the Cruise scanner. The Builder's Guide was digitized and mounted in 2018, and in 2020, the CLEAR-funded Historic Congregations Project began. So, why digitize? Okay, if we look back to the November 23rd of 1992 at this empty room, and imagine 22 people in there in one day, that was a pretty big day, and I guess you could consider that a successful day in that a lot of people got to see what they wanted to see, or what they had to see in terms of what their professors wanted them to look at and report on. But if we think back to, that was the total number of people we could help on any given day. And if we look at just one of the digital projects that has come from in the 21st century, and that's the Philadelphia Architects and Buildings Project. Since the project began, there's been over 1.6 million unique users. Now that's not 1.6 million hits. That's not the same person coming back 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. That's 1.6 million unique users, and so this shows the actual yearly use for the last 10 years, and you'll notice that there was a large spike to a little less than 220,000 or so users in the year 2020, which makes sense. When the pandemic hit, we saw large spikes in the usage of both PAB and the Greater Philadelphia History Network, since people had time to stay at home and study those things a little more carefully. And the projected usage for PAB alone for calendar year 2021 is somewhat over 250,000 people. So the Athenaeum is open in any given year about 220 days. So if we had 20 people on each of those in our reference room on each of those, let's say 200 days, you're talking about fewer than maybe 4,400 people, fewer than 5,000 certainly on any given day. And so this came from our board report from last January, which is a summary of the year 2020. So the total users of all of the Athenaeum websites, which are all served through that machine that I showed you, is 334,324. The average daily users, unique users of Athenaeum websites, is 2,064. So that's how many people use Athenaeum digital services every day. Not 22, but 2,064. So our outreach is much greater than we ever could have imagined. And I will be the first to admit that when people got very excited about digitizing materials, it frightened me quite a bit on a number of different reasons. But the thing that frightened me most was that, oh my gosh, if people see things online, they're all going to start coming and wanting to see them in person. And the exact opposite was true. It was counterintuitive that the more material that we put online, the fewer people that actually came in. This was not just an issue with the Athenaeum. The Library of Congress actually had the GSA do space studies, and they're probably one of the few agencies that went into digitization on a larger scale than we did in those early days, and the number of their number of researchers went down in their prints and photographs reading room, so much so that they reallocated reading room space to storage and less to desks for researchers. Do researchers still come in? Yes. Do they come into the Athenaeum? Do they come into the Library of Congress? Yes. But many of the researchers are served by not coming in, and that's okay too. And so next, oh, by the way, this is a holiday tree. You might notice that it's made out of the National Union catalog of pre-1956 imprints. I would imagine an entire forest could have been made from the full set there, but that's a most creative way to do that. Next time, we're going to be still on 219, but now it's inside 219. And in February, I'm going to be, actually in March, I'm going to be doing a lunchtime lecture about the collections, and in this case, the photography collections from Robert Cornelius to Jerome Lukovich. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. If anyone has any questions, we do have some time left. We do have a few questions already, Bruce. The first one being, can you talk about why and when the board decided to focus on architectural collections specifically?
Well, I will refer you to the last two of my lunchtime lectures, but certainly before I arrived. It essentially occurred between 1973 and 1983. Until 1973, the only architectural drawings we had were the drawings of the Athenaeum building, and there were fewer than 40 of those. So there really was a kind of a revolution in those 10 years. But they can look on YouTube and find out.
Yeah, actually, when you were showing that little pie chart, it made me think about our programming and how we've embraced the digital, with that. And in the past year, we've had 16,000 people view our YouTube channel.
Yep. And there, imagine 16,000 people in our building. We don't want that.
I don't want that.
And so we serve them better. And I'm not saying that we don't want anybody in our building, either for lectures or for research. There's no replacement for that. But our outreach and the bang for the buck is really much greater.
Do you know, off the top of your head, the furthest person you've helped with research, at least in the past couple of years? Like
Shanghai. I think once you get past there, you're starting to come back again. Yeah, I had actually a young woman from Shanghai who was interested in Philadelphia theater cinema history, and actually she's a professor at Penn, and she was very much interested in the Glaser collection here. So that's probably the farthest.
Yeah. What are some of the collections we have that you'd like to see digitized in the same way that the real estate guides have been done?
Well, there is a parallel resource to the Builder's Guide. It's sort of halfway between the Builder's Guide and a city directory, and they're called the Philadelphia Real Estate Directory Service. And essentially what they are reverse telephone books, and they began publication in 1924, and they continued publication till the year 2000, and we acquired an entire set of them, maybe the only complete set of these, and they're anywhere between 800 and 2,000 pages each. A very, very thin paper, like a telephone book. But in addition, these are arranged not by the names of owners, but by the block, by the street address. And so for the 200 block of South 6th Street, you could look up and see who owned the Athenaeum in any one of those years, and what the assessed value of the building was, the last sale date of the property, and then the actual dimensions of the property as well. For residential buildings, it is also very helpful in that it lists the address of the owner if it is not the same, if it's not the same address. So if you have a landlord, it tells you who the landlord is as well as who his or her tenant is. And so because they were published every year, you can trace people through that. We have an organization in the city that I cannot divulge right now, that is doing a preliminary scan of a couple of those volumes, and the work that they're doing should be quite interesting. So there's a lot that can be gleaned from that. So that's the sort of thing that it's not very pretty to look at. It's nothing that would ever be on an exhibition wall, but the data that it contains is extraordinarily important. Almost all of the drawings that we have, the architectural drawings that we have before the year 1900, have been digitized over the last 20 years. So we try to keep up with that as they come in. But the Horace Trumbauer collection, we've recently, through the Book Eye Scanner, we were able to scan 10 of his account books, and they're now available online as well. Much of what we have is driven by demand, in terms of what people are asking for, and then in some cases what they're willing to pay to have done. Actually, in a lot of cases.
Understandable. What is the expected lifespan of the Cruise scanner, and what kind of updates?
That's a good question. We purchased it in 2005. 2004. Jim Carroll, who has actually been running that machine for the last 17 years now, has done more cruise scans than anybody in the world. we know that our scanner is the most heavily used one. We know from the cruise company that ours is the most heavily used scanner in existence of the cruise scanners.
That's actually really cool.
The but we've only had breakdowns, I think, 3 times in the 17 years. The first time we had a breakdown, the motherboard of the scanner software burned out, and it happened late in the day, and so they put a call into the cruise headquarters, which is in Rhinebeck, Germany. And they thought, well, we'll just put the call in, for the service, and we'll hear back from them tomorrow morning, because in Rhinebeck it was already after 10 o'clock p.m. And who answers the phone but Herman Cruz? And so Herman said, he says, we know what the problem is. We'll send you a new component, overnight it. And so by 5 o'clock the next afternoon, it was installed, and it was up and going. So we've never been out of service for more than 24 hours on the cruise. Jim could tell you more about that, but they really are workhorses. I know that the Art Institute of Chicago recently got one recently in the last 2 or 3 years, as did the Pentagon shortly after we got ours. A number of people come to see the cruise and see its operation, and Jim has always been very helpful, with that. Oh, I forgot to mention that we also are used, the Imaging Center is used extensively by the Philadelphia artist community. And there are about 30 to 40 artists who use us to both digitize and create prints that they then resell. And a number of the artists, we have had exhibitions both in the Haas Gallery as well as in features of our First Friday programs, and they've been very, very popular.
I was surprised you didn't mention when you worked with the White House.
Well, why, thank you. Yes, I guess that's the biggest name. Back in 2012, I had gone to lunch, and again, it shows you how much times have changed. When I returned from lunch, I had a little pink slip while you were out message on the front desk, and they seem to have gone the way of hoop skirts and spelling bees. But and it had a 202 number, and I had a question about scanning, and it just said the president's office. And I thought, the president of what? Georgetown, or and sure enough, it was the White House. But they were looking for actually somebody who could do prints on canvas of portraits of 7 secretaries of state. They were redecorating the vice president's executive reception room, which is in the old executive office building. And so they needed to have somebody who could produce these in a way that looked like the originals. And so we did those. We did scans of everybody from Thomas Jefferson to Cordell Hull, I think was the newest one. And then in 2012, Mike and Jim and I were invited to the White House to see these things for a tour of the White House, and then across the way to the EOB to see the vice president's reception room. And so they were very, very pleased about that. The people at the White House. So.
I'm sure they would have been pleased with their portraits as well.
Yes.
One other question. Let me just read this. Do you think there are any other American cities that have resources like this, the online and for free? The kind of architectural resources that we have.
Not in the comprehensive way. There are a couple of places that are beginning to scan geographical documents in the way that we had done on geohistory, and there's a fellow by the name of Rumsey who has a private collection of maps and atlases that actually, that are worldwide in scope and go back to the Middle Ages, he has created a site of his own material that have been done very, very, very well. Los Angeles has done some work in essentially documenting every spot in Los Angeles County, but it's not quite the same as what we've been doing here. So I haven't seen others to duplicate it. We have had a tentative off again, on again partnership with the folks at the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, and I believe it was Towson State that was involved in it early on. The Baltimore AIA, that's what it was. And so there are quite a few Baltimore buildings in the database as well. And we've had some discussions with the folks in Texas and in Pittsburgh, but it's a big swallow, and to kind of get it off the ground.
So before the PAB website, I mean, I can't even imagine how anyone would have done research without it, but.
Well, the thing is that it's not comprehensive in the sense that you will find everything you need there, but it is a heck of a good place to start, and you can save yourself a lot of trouble. And when I realized what a difference the digital world made was when I started to not have to go to the card catalog or go to the bookshelf as much when a reference call came in, that I could answer a standard reference question without getting off of my tail, which is probably a bad thing for me, but a good thing for the person on the other end of the line.
True.
And so there's and the great thing about PAB is that or any other digital product is that it's updatable. If somebody says, well, you spelled great granddad's name wrong, okay, or you have his birth date wrong, okay, we'll change it. So it's updatable.
Here's a question I think you'll like. Is there a digitization team that scans the thousands of items in the collections, or does Jim Carroll do all the scanning?
Well, it was Jim Carroll and Mike Seneca. Mike did a lot more than people realize in terms of the scanning, but yeah, Jim Carroll is kind of the public face and is really terrific in terms of customer service and calming folks down, with the process, particularly first time scanners, and both from a museum setting as well as a personal setting. They'll say, well, can I stay here and watch while you do it? Yeah, you can. And that's fine. But I think one of the successes of having the imaging center here at a place like the Athenaeum is that you already have a staff who knows how to handle rare and fragile objects, and so that's not an issue. There used to be a cruise scanner. It was a lower end version at a reproduction house up at 4th and Fairmount back before we got the cruise scanner, and we took some samples up there to be scanned, and stuff was just like thrown all over the place. And we went to another museum too to see a different scanner, and the scanner crashed 3 times during the demo that the manufacturer was giving. The machine crashed 3 times, and the lights were so intense that you could actually smell the drawings start to burn. So we decided not to go that route. Yeah, it's the sort of thing that every city should have one, and preferably in a nonprofit, but not every institution. And I kind of use the conservation center as as a model there. Not every institution can afford or needs to have a full-time conservator or conservation team, but in terms of conservation team, it's it was Mike and now is Jim. We have had a number of side projects where some of the scanning has been done by interns. We actually have a part-time person, Rob Jagiello. Is that correct? Who has been helping us out on one of our contract projects on the Book Eye scanner right now, and he's doing a great job as well. But that's the team.
Mm-hmm. So.
The productivity has soared. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we're actually getting a lot of questions that are very specific to Arctic. So now I'm thinking maybe we need an Arctic specific talk. So that we can answer all these sort of more detailed questions.
Also remember, and please, I would wait at least until mid-January, but if you would like to schedule an appointment just to come in and take a look at it and talk about what we do, we'd be happy to talk to you. And if Jim is busy, you can stick your head in, and I can tell you I can take you across the hall and tell you all the ins and outs and answer your questions, or even more comfortably take you into the boardroom and sit down in a comfortable setting.
And for our members that are on the call, they do get 25% off all Arctic services, whether it's scanning or printing. And no project is too small or too big. I've seen Jim scan. I think the largest thing I saw him scan was like 8 feet long, like 6 feet tall. And the smallest thing I've seen him scan was probably like 4 inches. I've never seen Jim say no. That's always what I tell people. I've never seen Jim
it's true, and we're very lucky to have him.
So. As Bruce said, his next part of this series will be March 8th, 12 p.m. again, online via Zoom. So when I have that up on our website, there'll be a link available to register for that. And in the meantime, our next exhibition will open mid-January, so you can come see that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Right. Bye.